Captain Peter Frank, right?
Sure.
All right, man. What's happening?
I'm not actually a captain, but
I saw it on Instagram.
It's pretty funny though.
Yeah.
I started it as a joke, but ironically, I actually have all my documented hours to become a captain. I just need to go through 2 weeks of training.
I'll do the test, man. It's easy.
I've never stayed anywhere for longer than 2 weeks until now.
No way.
Yeah.
That's freaking awesome, man. Well, yeah, I'm so glad you're able to make it here. A buddy of mine texted me and he's like, man, check this out. This guy is doing the Great Loop Challenge. And for those listening, the Great Loop Challenge is, correct me if I'm wrong, you start at the bottom of the Mississippi and then you go all the way around up to Canada, back down to the Intracoastal Waterway up in Maine, and then all the way down to Florida. And is that does it matter where you start?
No.
Okay, it doesn't matter where you start.
No, it's a loop, so you start anywhere.
Okay.
Just as long as you cross your wake. Takes most people anywhere from like 3 months to 2 years.
Okay.
Some people take longer, some people take less.
So yeah, so he called me and he's like, yeah, there's a guy doing it on a kayak. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, he's like, yeah, he's stopping by Wilmington right now. Or I was like, sweet, let's get him a shout, let's have him on. And so I reached out. I think I reached out to you on Instagram and it worked out. And you're kind of at a standstill, which kind of sucks, but at the same time, it's pretty important that luckily you had somebody to stop at, because it's cold as shit.
Yeah, it's gotten there.
So let's go back to where you started, what made you want to do this, and I mean, I know nothing about you, so I'm excited to learn.
Awesome. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man.
Okay, what's your first question?
Well, no, like where'd you get started? Where did you launch your kayak at to decide to start heading? Did you start heading north or south?
I started as north as I could go. So I started on the northwestern side of Lake Michigan.
Okay.
So it'd be Escanaba. And right now I'm about 1,918 miles in 186 days. Was the day that I pulled out. Now I'm sitting at 202 days because of the cold fronts.
Yeah.
So I'm burning time, but I try to stay productive.
Do you have a timeline that you want to try to succeed in?
Yeah, and I'm about 75 days behind that timeline right now.
What kind of kayak we working with?
It's a 1982 decked expedition canoe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was I spent a while looking for it. It was one of Verlen Kruger's designs. If you don't know who Verlen Kruger is, he's the guy who holds the world record for not the one, but the 2 longest canoeing expeditions ever taken in human history.
No way. And what is that?
Well, he built this canoe as a prototype in 1979, specifically for one expedition that he was going on with his son, Steve Landick.
Mm-hmm.
This was 1980 to 1983. And he modeled this canoe that has a decking, so it's like a hybrid almost.
Yeah.
So it's a mix between a kayak and a canoe. But it's entirely hollow. It has a raised seat. It does have a rudder, but the cockpit is 7 feet long. Out of the canoe itself is 17 feet long. So there's only 10 feet of decking. So,
did you have to do any accommodations for this? I mean, I'm assuming you put a comfortable seat in there, some heaters, or foot warmers or something.
No, just socks and hand warmers.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I put a lot of work into it though.
Yeah.
I put new stripping tape on the sides. I covered the rim in rubber, and I polished up a lot of the hull that was really dented from previous expeditions that I had been on. So I think I'm pushing probably 4,500 miles, if I'd have to guess.
Holy shit!
In this canoe specifically.
What were the previous expeditions that you've done?
Oh, I've been on a couple. I like traveling for the fact that I get to really challenge myself.
Yeah.
I get to exercise, breathe heavily.
Yeah.
All the things.
Stay outside.
Get sunlight. You also get to meet people. It's probably one of my favorite parts. So I had done a number of trips. One of them was, my first one was when I was 19, and I bought this unicycle. And this unicycle I took on a cross-country expedition. I rode across the United States. It ended up being 2,400 miles.
On a unicycle?
On a unicycle, yeah.
Holy shit.
That's
awesome.
And then I ended up doing another 1,000 after that for fun.
Which path did you take?
I went north to south. So
Okay.
I did Wisconsin to Arizona, and then I went from Arizona to California, and then back to
Dude, I
Utah.
couldn't even ride one like 5 feet. They're hard.
It's been a couple of years. I don't think I could either.
That's nuts, man. How was that trip?
It was exhilarating. It was fun. I kind of did that. I felt in my heart that I really needed to do that.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I wasn't trying to be the best at anything. I wasn't trying to set any records. I just really enjoyed unicycling. And what had happened was I went through a really it's kind of a cataclysmic event in my younger life. I think I was 14 years old, and I was hiding in a leaf pile from my friends when they went in for dinner,
Yeah.
and a car came and ran through the leaf pile. I ended up
Damn.
breaking 14 bones, including shattering my L1 and L2 on my spine. I think I was a centimeter from being paralyzed for the
Holy
rest of my life. And I went through a lot of recovery in my young life. Took quite a bit out of me. A lot of challenges came up from that. It was a full year and a half of physically intensive rehab, and then I went into psychological rehab afterwards. But through that time that I was in the hospital, I was able to see my family every
Mhm.
day because of this charity organization that had stepped in called the Beacon House, and they let my parents stay for free at this facility, and because
Wow.
we didn't live close to the hospital, so thanks to them, I was able to see my family every day. And then 6 years after getting run over when I was 19, I bought this unicycle and I rode it across the country in honor of that charity organization, and we ended up raising 34,000 for them.
That's awesome,
So that
man.
was the beginning of the trips, but through that, I found my love for traveling. So afterwards, I stopped doing charity fundraising because I didn't have enough funds to be able
Mhm.
to raise money for another organization, and I wasn't really taking anything for myself. So I wanted to really explore like more in my young life.
Yeah.
Wanted to continue like figuring out what I was capable of, especially with the injuries and everything. So
How old are you now?
23,
23.
yeah,
Man, you're just getting started.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
kinda jealous.
it's my first rodeo, that's for sure.
What do you, what's been the hardest so far? What I mean, well, so you're working on this Great Loop Challenge. You've done the unicycle across the country. What else have you done?
Um, well, after the unicycle trip, I took a couple months off. I think I took 6 or 7 months off. I went back with my parents,
Mhm.
and I liked unicycling. It was fun, but it was a big toll on my body, especially with the injuries and the
Especially with your
surgeries.
back, right? I feel like
Yeah, I've got 2 titanium rods in my spine and one in my
damn,
right
man.
femur, so that, uh that alone, really hindered me in my quest for doing these long
Yeah.
trips under complete manpower. So I tried a number of different things. One thing that I really enjoyed, that I ended up really enjoying, was canoeing.
Mhm.
So I ended up finding this 1982 open face blue hull. It was a blue hole,
Mhm.
which is a huge Royal X expedition whitewater canoe.
Okay.
So it's made to be almost indestructible.
Like beat up, yeah.
Yeah, you could drop it off an 8-story building and it wouldn't
Wow.
even crack. And but it was heavy. It was like 110 pounds.
Yeah, yeah.
So I took this whitewater canoe, and I got my parents to drop me off in Minnesota, which was, I'm from Michigan, so
Yeah.
it was a like an 8-10 hour drive. And I gave them gas money. They dropped me off. I fitted up with everything I thought I need. And prior to that trip, I spent 6 months sewing and hand making my own ensemble. And so for that trip, I thought it would be really funny if I dressed like a pirate. So so I did, and I made my own pirate tricorn. Not this one,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I had a different one, and I made it out of deerskin, and I hand sewed it. Took quite a while. I had no leather working skills, but the I really thought it would be funny, so I just kept hammering it out, and then when I did it, I had this whole ensemble, I had all the equipment with me, I saved up for it, and I departed from the headwaters of the Mississippi River, and 5 months later, it's 144 days. Yeah, so I paddled the entire Mississippi River in that canoe, and it really sucked because that canoe was not made for going long distances, it was really slow, but it was a great trip, and I really loved canoeing through that. So it took 5 months to do the entire river. I had a lot of experiences in that, but then when I got to the Gulf of Mexico, I didn't really want to stop. I didn't
Mhm.
feel like, I had just spent like 7 months waiting to go on this another trip, and it just I don't know, I still felt like a lot of fire in my heart. So
Yeah.
I sold the canoe to a kind gentleman that I had met along the way, and he donated it to a charity that was then auctioned off, and all the proceeds went to charity, which I was really happy to hear about. And I bought a bicycle with the money that I got for that canoe, and I biked 700 miles to Florida. And on the way there, I found this 4-month-old Siamese kitten out in the woods. It was during the cold front of 2022 down on the Gulf Coast.
Uh-huh.
It was over Thanksgiving, and it was 22 degrees outside that night. So that cat, I'm pretty positive would have been dead that
Oh, yeah,
night
you
if I
saved the
never
cat's
found him.
life.
So I picked him up, and it was just a frail little thing. It was like this in my arms, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've never taken care of an animal before. How do
Yeah.
I do this? So I asked everybody around if anybody wanted to take the cat or could take him in, and everybody was saying that there's strays all the time, and in this area, we all have a house full of dogs and cats that we pick up all the time. Nobody could take in this cat.
It's insane. It's actually really sad.
It is really sad.
Yeah.
And it just didn't really seem like this cat was a stray. So I looked around online, posted up everywhere. Even the city of Gulfport had posted it up, and nobody came and claimed the cat, that it was theirs. So after some speculation, we found that there was this barn that was about 7 miles. It was the closest residence that it could have come from.
Okay.
Yeah, it could have came from anywhere, but most logically, we found this barn, and this barn had like 50, 100 feral cats running around. So we theorized that
Yeah.
4 months old is about the time when a cat gets off of its mother's nipple. So
Yeah.
figure it was at the point where it started to eat on its own, and it was competing for food. So it ran away. It didn't want to compete with food. So it ended up there. I found it. I nursed it back to health. It had an upper respiratory infection in its nostrils. I went to a local goat farm, and I picked up a gallon of raw goat's milk, and I fed it nothing but goat's milk for 6 days. And then its upper respiratory infection went away.
Nice.
And
So this is during the middle of your bike trip.
yeah.
How did you transport? Did you just throw it in a backpack or something?
Yeah, I had this small little bag. It was like this big.
That's awesome.
And this cat was like this big.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's perfect. So I stuck the cat in this bag, and I cut a hole in the bag, and he popped his little head out like this, and he'd be like, and I would bike with this cat on my chest.
And he liked it?
And well, he
Or
was so
he or
he was
she?
so young, he
Okay.
got conditioned to anything.
What's his name?
I named him River.
River.
Yeah.
Love it. And River is with you on this expedition?
No.
No? I thought I saw a picture of a cat in a kayak. Maybe it was a different trip.
I repost things sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was on that trip though. So I bike 700 miles of Florida. I get somewhere down the Gulf Coast a little bit, and the reason why I did that was because when I was in New Orleans, I found this canoe online. I knew about its history. I knew where it came from. I knew what it was taken on, and I knew its capabilities. So I reached out to the owners, who are the second owners of this canoe, and the canoe's now 42 years old. So I reached out. I said, I really want this canoe. I have just enough money. I'm going to come get this canoe. They're like, okay, where are you? I said, well, I'm in New Orleans. They're like, okay, when will you be here? I'm like, I'll be there in 3 months. So I get this bicycle and I bike to Florida. I pick up this
Did
cattle.
you tell them how you're getting there?
Yeah. So they said, okay, well, hold on to it until you get here.
No way.
So I spent 3 months biking to Florida in the middle of winter.
Imagine if they sold it. You would probably been pretty pissed.
My life would probably be a lot different right now. So yeah, I get to this canoe and I don't have anything because I spent every dime that I had on this canoe. And I tossed my bike in storage. Everything was, I didn't really have anything. So I just had the cat, me, and like one small little duffel bag that was this big.
Okay, so these are the pictures that I'm seeing with this canoe and the cat in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I threw all my stuff into this canoe, and I didn't have anything. I didn't have any equipment. I didn't even have a paddle. There were people that had stepped up, hearing about my trip, and they had helped me out tremendously. One of these people was Robert Arrington, which I'm sure you know of from
Yeah.
Deer Meat for Dinner.
Yes.
And he stepped up and he heard about my trip.
Awesome.
And he contacted me and drove all the way across Florida from his home on the Atlantic side to the western side of Florida.
That's awesome.
And he bought me a paddle and got me a sponsorship for Frog Togs. And they donated a bunch of dry bags and everything and all the equipment that I would need for that trip. And I still have most of that equipment in my canoe.
So equipment like what we talked about earlier, like any safety equipment, all that stuff that you
Food safety equipment, life vest, paddle, bags, dry bags, knives, carabiners, anything you
Awesome. Yeah, qualified captain. We try to. you said you didn't weren't too familiar about us, but like our goal moving forward. Well, I started this page as a total joke, and I kept on seeing all this crazy stuff that was happening on the water, especially younger kids, drinking on the boats and just acting like fools. Um, we're kind of exposing that behavior and not even exposing that, but then also trying to tell people like, hey, educate yourself before you go out in the water or buy a boat because the water's no joke. I mean, you've spent hours and hours and hours on the water and stuff can happen fast. So yeah, man, that's kind of what we've been trying to help educate those guys. So I mean, for those listening, what do you carry on though? Besides, like, what's your most important thing you think that you have in that bag that you think's the most important for safety?
Well, now after I guess so many experiences, being in rough conditions and having gone through a lot of things, I think I now carry 3 flares under my seat.
Mm-hmm.
I carry a VHF radio, and I carry a Garmin GPS. So those are 3 very important things.
Mm-hmm.
I think the waterproof flares is pretty important. I didn't start carrying those until a couple months ago. GPS I now carry, and the radio, because if you're doing any kind of boating around larger traffic, larger vessels, anything through ports, Charleston, New York City, New Orleans, St. Louis, anything like that, you're going to need a radio. You want contact with the ships and contact with other boats.
Or if people see you, they might want to reach out to you. I'm sure did people ever say, hey, dude, on the kayak, do you have a radio?
Yeah. On the Mississippi River, there was a tugboat that was sweeping down the river, and the current was just ripping down so fast that day. I think it was like 7 or 8 knots. I had never seen it so fast. And I'm like paddling almost with this tugboat, because the tugboats don't go very fast.
Mm-hmm.
With the current, I was almost keeping up with this tugboat. Wow. And so he's talking to this boat behind me, and I have my radio on, and I can hear him, and he says, "Go look at this guy, he's in a canoe." And I'm like, "Roger that, this is a canoe." And he's like, "Dude, you're crazy. Where do you come from?" And I'm like, "Minnesota?" He says, "George, that's good." And he just completely loses his shit over the radio. And I can hear him just flipping out. He's like, "This guy came from Minnesota." And I'm like, I'm just sitting there chuckling, and I'm paddling. And
whereabouts were you at this point?
I was in Illinois.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so I was like 800-900 miles into the trip. So they were just dumbfounded that this kid had just paddled here in this canoe. And I ended up paddling all the way to, New Orleans, take that bicycle to Florida, and then I got that canoe. And I left in the for my circumnavigation, even though I had all my equipment, I left with I think like $7.25 in my wallet.
Damn.
So and if it wasn't for a lot of people that I had met through that circumnavigation, I never would have got as far as I did. But I think within the first week, I met a guy on a beach, and he asked me what my story was, and I told him, I was paddling from Minnesota, and that blew his mind, and he gave me $100, and I made that $100 last like the entire month. And I had a casting net. So the way that I was feeding this cat was I was cast netting. And so I was fishing every single day and feeding this cat fresh fish. And then whenever I could, I would go to the store and pick up organs and a lot of organ meat and red meats so that I could give him a balanced diet. And so he didn't get any deficiencies. Me, I was eating like beans out of a can. And I was eating a lot of the fish.
I would have kept a rod and fished, the whole time.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do. Yeah. But when fishing wasn't plentiful, I carried things. And also Robert Arrington at that time, he had dehydrated. I think it was like, I don't know how much. It filled like 2 5.5-gallon drums full of dehydrated beef jerky. So cool. I had just like this huge surplus of dried meats.
That's pretty light too, that you can have on board.
Yeah. So that's what I pretty much lived off of. And I did the full circumnavigation after, I think it took like 3 or something months. And I made it all the way up to South Carolina, which is actually just south of here. Mm-hmm. And that was when the fishing just completely died out, went scarce. Yep. There were no more pinfish, no more sheep's head. There was nothing. I couldn't catch catfish or anything anymore. I didn't have a fishing pole. My cast net just wasn't picking anything up off the bottom. It was just oysters. So, and it wasn't live oysters. It was like dead oysters. It's just oyster shells, and they were cutting up my net and everything. So it got to a point where I couldn't really feed myself as sustainably, and I could see in the future that I wasn't going to be able to continue feeding the cat. So at that point, I realized that it was just time to stop. I wasn't having fun anymore. I was out there, I was exploring. I ended up spanning 4,700 miles over the course of 11 months.
Wow.
And I pulled the expedition. I called my parents. My parents kindly took me back in, and they adopted my cat River, and he's been living there ever since.
That's awesome. So they had to come and pick you up in South Carolina.
No, I met a gentleman. I met him in the 10,000 Islands of Florida.
Okay.
And he offered to drive 16 hours across the country
What? That's
and
awesome.
pick me up and bring me to Ohio. And I stayed 2 weeks with him, and he paid me to work with him in his painter's business because he painted townhouses. So I was actually able to make some money, feed myself and the cat for 2 weeks, and then I went back to my parents. And then a month after that, then I went back to the Mississippi, and I repaddled the first 500 miles of the Mississippi.
How do your parents feel about this? I was like, I've been thinking this the whole time. Like, what do they, they love it, or do they kind of like, what the hell are you doing, dude?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd say in the beginning they were quite worried.
Yeah.
They wanted to really make sure that I was safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like all parents do, but they've always been very emotionally supportive of kind of this weird, ambitious side. The year was 2023. No, so the year was 2023, and I think it's February, maybe it's March, and I'm canoeing along. I'm beginning my circumnavigation. I'm only a couple hundred miles in. I have the cat with me, and I have come across the 10,000 Islands, which is like right on the coast of the Everglades. It's right there, and it just breaks apart into all these sand dunes and islands and everything. And when you go in it, it's like this jungle maze, because these walls and segments of the maze get sectioned off with the tide. So every 6 hours, if the tide goes low enough, you can't canoe through it. But if the tide is high enough, you can canoe through the segments, but you can get blocked off if you don't plan carefully. I felt like I was a little bit too inexperienced, so I paddled on the open coast of the Gulf of Mexico the entire time. I was in open water.
Yeah.
And I had prepared for that because the whole span, I think it was like 110, 120 miles from the beginning of the 10,000 Islands, right under Naples, to the Isla Mirada, Florida, the Florida Keys.
Yep. And
that span of distance, there were no water restocks. And if you wanted a water restock, you would have to paddle into...
You got Marco Island. That's about it.
You would have to paddle into Everglades City.
Yeah.
Which is a huge detour in a canoe.
Yes.
Huge. Like I
know the area pretty well.
You're taking like at least 1 to 2 days off to go in and come back out.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be prepared enough. So I carried with me 12 gallons of water on the floor of my canoe. I carried 96 pounds of water for this segment, plus my food, my fat cat that was growing very fast. Me, I was also somewhat of a fat cat, and all of my luggage and equipment. And so that's what I did. And I carried 12 gallons of water. It took 7 days to get to, 7 days to get to Flamingo, which is right above Isla Mirada. It's like there's this huge body of water in between the Keys and the bottom side of Florida on the mainland.
Yep.
And so I got to Flamingo, which is a campground, and that was the first kind of like society that I had been in 7 days. I hadn't had a shower, hadn't had any wash, anything like that. And I had my cat with me, and I was feeding my cat fish, and for that I also stocked up on dried fish and some cat food. He wasn't used to eating cat food, but I carried it just in case.
Yeah.
I always made sure that cat was fed, by the way, so please don't
No.
be worried at all. So the cat had a great time. And plus he lives with my parents now, and he has a great
You
life.
saved the cat's life.
I think that he had a really adventurous childhood.
Yeah.
And it was only like a 6-month period. So, well, anyway, we made it after 7 days. And when I got there, I had 3 gallons of water left. So I had drank 9 gallons of water in the 7 days for like cooking a couple other things. The cat had fallen in a couple times. I needed to wash off the cat with fresh water.
Yeah.
Otherwise he would lick his fur and throw up because animals can't tolerate salt in their stomach. So that's what happens. And when the cat throws up, he throws up his lunch, and the food is very valuable. So you have to be mindful of these things. I was expending more water than usual. I knew that I had enough water, and I carried extra. What I did was I carried 1 gallon of water per day that I thought I'd be out there, plus a little bit extra. So I thought it would take me 10 days. And it took me 7, and I drank 9 gallons of water in 7 days. So I carried extra for that purpose.
That's smart.
And that was why. I would have rationed water a lot better than I had, but I carried enough so I didn't have to.
You carried that extra amount for that exact reason.
For that exact reason. So I had 3 gallons of water, and it was my last day of the 10,000 islands. I mean, all the islands are over with. There's still islands, but it's all spread apart now. So between Flamingo and Isla Morada, there is a span of 26 miles of open water on the Gulf of Mexico. And that entire span, there's a couple islands here and there, but only one of them you can actually step off onto. It's a campsite. It's called Rabbit Key.
Okay.
Little Rabbit Key.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. And it's 12 miles. So it's right in between. Well, Rabbit Key, imagine like here is Isla Morada, here is Flamingo. Rabbit Key is like down here. So you'd have to go here and then like here. Instead, I went like this. I had the weather window because the day immediately after that day, it was too windy to be able to move. So I thought to myself, I can't go to Rabbit Key and camp there because I won't be able to leave Rabbit Key in the morning. So what did I do? I had to paddle the 26 miles of open water that day. And it was literally the day after I got to there. It was really late in the afternoon when I arrived in Flamingo, and I saw on my charts that I had the window, and I just was like, couldn't have given me a day to just rest. I was tired. First shower that I had.
Yeah.
And I didn't even shower. There was no facilities to shower at. In fact, I met a wonderful couple there, and they were traveling around, and they were both. His wife was a veteran, and he was a firefighter, and they had an outdoor shower, and I showered outside of their van that they had, and so that was the first shower I had in 7 days. And the next morning I had to cross. Like, that was the day. I was tired, but I did it anyway. And I went through 7.5 hours into this crossing, 20 miles in. I am 6 miles offshore. I can finally see the telephone poles. Now it's like the antennas on Isla Morada from 6 miles away. I finally have a landmark. I can finally put my compass away. And all of a sudden, what feels like a pontoon boat ramming me from behind my canoe just like barrels 7 feet forward and goes like this. And I turn around, and all of a sudden there's this 6-foot bull shark latched onto my aluminum shiny rudder. And he's like this, and I'm like, and I'm like paddling as hard as I can, trying to make it to shore. And I'm 2 hours from shore.
Yeah.
This is terrifying. And he was just interested in my rudder because it was shiny, but he bumped me. He was 6 feet long, so he had a lot of power.
I've seen videos of that happen quite often. People fishing on kayaks and stuff. Damn, man, that's nuts.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts. And the cat was asleep the whole time. He took a 9-hour nap that day, so it took 9 hours to paddle to Isla Morada. And when I made it there 2 hours later, the cat was still sleeping, and he just woke up, and he kind of looked around, and he's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "What's going on over here?" And I'm like, "Oh, silent, you little devil." And I get out, and I step on shore, and I turn around, and I look out in the open body water of the Gulf of Mexico, and all of a sudden there's this sign post right there on the water. It says, "Do not swim. There are American crocodiles here."
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So that was the 10,000 islands.
Damn, man. That probably scared the shit out of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I had that on my mind for a while. But I didn't see any. I'm very happy about that. By the way, for people who don't know, alligators and crocodiles are very different. The Florida Keys are the only place in the United States that there are crocodiles. They're saltwater crocodiles, and they're huge, and they swim very fast. Alligators don't like saltwater. You will see them in saltwater, but they mostly stay inland where it's more brackish. So alligators are timid. They'll shy away from you if they see you unless it's mating season or they're territorial.
Yeah.
But crocodiles will more often than not chase you down and hiss at you.
Yeah, they're more aggressive, right?
They're very aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very
I've
scary
never really
thing.
seen crocs. I've always seen gators more.
I saw a lot of gators. I've seen 13-footers out there in the canoe.
There's gators here.
But they're timid. You know, they don't bother you, even the big ones.
There's big gators in North Carolina. You wouldn't think it. They're here.
They are. I don't want to see them.
No, I don't.
I hope not. But
Dude, I love it, man. I think you mentioned earlier that one of the things you like the most is meeting new people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I learned from traveling for work now and doing all these different things versus going to a 9-to-5 all the time, is I'm getting to meet different people like you and doing this podcast. So that's what I like the most about it, you know? So after that was your second expedition, then the third is the one that you're currently doing right now?
Yeah. So during that second one, I just kind of I really got to meet a lot of people that were in these big trawlers, and I'm like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And they're like, "Well, we're doing this thing called the Great Loop." And so that's what I kind of conceptualized. My big plan for that trip, as young and inexperienced as I was, my plan was to paddle all the way back to Michigan. That was my plan initially. So when it came around, and I had between the second Mississippi descent and 6 months ago when I started this one, I had a full year, or a little bit less than a year. It was like 10 months to be able to prepare and think about what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, I want to do the Great Loop. That does seem like a pretty cool aspiration. There's a lot of places on there that I haven't experienced. I had a great time on it already. With enough planning and preparation, I could actually do it right. So I started emailing. I emailed brands, businesses, magazines. I think I sent about 400 or so personalized emails that I wrote from scratch over the span of a month. And I was just sending these emails day after day. I got, I think, 2 or 3 brands to reach back to me. And I had a few people that were really invested and want to be on board. I never received much of any monetary donations at all. Most of the trip was initially saved up for, but now at this point, I pay for it through the writing. So I got a magazine in the beginning to pick up my work, and they published me once, and then I was able to use that to get another magazine to publish me. And then now I work for Michigan Enjoyer, which I'm really happy about. I'm really enjoying writing for them because I'm from Michigan, so I have a lot of. Well,
shout out to them. We'll have to tag that link.
Yeah, they're
and
awesome.
Share this information with people.
Yeah, Michigan Enjoyer is a great magazine. They have a lot of really great values, and I'm happy to be working for somebody that I share similar values with too. Really cool people up there, and I'm happy to actually use my skills to be able to make my own income.
Yeah, you're
for the
saying
first
you like
time.
to write.
Yeah,
You need to write a book.
I guess
You should.
maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But beyond that, I've also received donations in the past, which are really appreciated. Have you ever seen this thing? It's called a Ko-fi, Buy Me a Ko-fi, but it's spelled Ko-fi because of the name of the website, but it's actually supposed to be a coffee.
No, I've never seen
And
it.
so it's a $5 donation. It's a set amount, and people link that to their thing, and you say, "Buy me a coffee," but they just send you $5, but it's supposed to be for coffee.
That's cool.
So I thought that was cool, but I didn't want to go through another app to be able to I don't know, receive things. There's already so many. There's PayPal, Venmo, and Cash App. There's all the billions of them. It's just oh my gosh, it just feels so mind numbing that everything has its own outlet. So
it is. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
it's weird.
So through that time that I was writing these emails, I also rebuilt my website from scratch. And while I was rebuilding my website, I thought, well, I'm already here in the website editor. I'll just make my own thing. So I made my own thing, and I called it the Rotisserie Chicken Fund. So when you go to the website, there's this picture of a big rotisserie chicken, and people can send a set amount. It's not very much. And it started with $5. Now it's just $10 because it's chickens used to be $5. But I don't usually just go buy a chicken. It's a food fund.
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, we'll add that to the link after this on YouTube.
So that had helped in the beginning. Yeah. So when I started the trip, there was a lot of people that came in and were like, "Hey, I'm going to send you a chicken." And so I lived pretty much off of those donations for the first little while until I started getting more writing gigs. and getting like actually self-sufficient, because I wanted to do it right. My goal was never to go out and be a bum and like travel across the country in a canoe with no money. I never wanted to do that.
Yeah.
But I had the dreams and the ambitions and the ability to do it long before I had the way to be able to finance it. So I just went out there and did it anyway. Well, now that, like, since my goal isn't to just be a bum and live out of a canoe, because that's not desirable. It's not what I want to do. I'll never like ask for money. I don't like to do that.
You don't really want that reputation either.
Right, exactly. So, but the goal in the end is to be able to find a way to do it self-sufficiently. And I knew how. It's just difficult to build your way up to that, because when you start from nothing, it's just very difficult to build from nothing.
Yeah.
I don't have the tools. But
I think you're on the right path, man. I mean, I'm, from what I've been seeing and learning and listening to this, and you're only 23.
Well, it's a path.
Yeah.
It's not a desired path, and it's not the best path, but it's my path, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
Because like I'm not suffering, I'm not hurting anybody, and I'm not hurting myself. And I'm learning through this. I'm learning valuable skills about how to be my own man, how to be my own person. I'm learning virtues, patience, gentleness, kindness. I'm learning strength skills, and so it's like I'm learning all of these different values in my young life that are going to propel me for the rest of my life. And through that, I can use these skills to be able to find a way to make a living, or at least make some kind of living for myself that's appropriate for what I do.
Yeah.
And I think that is what the part should be inspiring about, not the fact that he quit his job and went out there and took this huge risk, because it's like, there is a huge risk when people do that. And
sometimes taking huge risks, though, are where people succeed the most,
100%.
I mean, that's what I've learned. I've learned that from not just myself, other very successful people.
Yeah.
You got to take risks, man.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. I just think that the way that social media has watered down those risks, as if there were some kind of, it's a risk because there's a possibility that nothing could happen from it. And that's the thing that should be very heavily considered. I was fortunate enough in my young life and had the support enough to be able to take risks without much backlash, because when you're young, you can mess up a bunch of times.
Yeah.
You can always turn around and be like, okay, well, that didn't work.
Yep.
And then, I have amazing parents that were like, yeah, just come in and recollect yourself and try something else.
Yeah.
And I have to recognize that, I'm not a nomad. I'm not a homeless man. I'm not, somebody who's less fortunate. I'm very fortunate for the family I have, for the friends and the people that I've met. And I recognize that tremendously. But
well, they want everybody to just graduate high school, and if you don't go to college, like, you're a bum. That's kind of I think that mindset's kind of leaving though society. I think they're pushing kids to go, hey, go to a tech school, or if you're not into that, try to start your own business, or get that out of your system, like you said, at a younger age. You don't need to go forced into this like corporate world, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't need to go do this, I don't know, 9 to 5 and be just told what to do all the time. I think people need to take more risks and not just get sucked into got to go to college, got to do this,
Yeah.
That's I don't know. Just the more I keep hearing these stories like yours and other people, it can work out,
Yeah. I think that those risks should be aligned with the things that you really want to do, like the things that you really love and the things that you're really good at it. Because if you do things that you're really good at, then chances are, if you do it enough, you're going to really succeed at it. Because if you're really good at something and you really love to do it, then more often than not, that thing is going to be a really big contribution to society, because people see that you have a lot of passion in what you do, especially artwork, especially like architecture, design work, any kind of interior design, traveling, writing. Yeah, it's any kind of special skill that aligns with like creation.
Yeah.
As its base model. So if you create something, you're providing something to the world. Most of the time, that's a good thing. Most of the time, unless it's like rooted in evil nature.
I get what you're saying.
But like, you created a podcast, for example, right?
Yeah, and I just did this just for fun,
Exactly.
Yeah.
You did it for fun, and you really wanted to do it because you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
You love to do it.
Talking to people. I like people that love. I love the water. You clearly love the water. And
I'm somewhat of a thalassophile myself.
Like I said, when I don't really have a set schedule, but if I hear something cool or like somebody's close by, I don't really have the budget yet to go fly people in and out of here yet, but maybe one day, but
Yeah, but look at that value that you've now provided to the world,
yeah.
that people can be entertained by, people can learn from, people can pull values from and improve their own lives because of that, because of these conversations, and because of the videos you share, because of the writing, because of everything.
Well, that's my goal. I've been bringing on a lot of people that have been at serious accidents at sea, like full survival stories. Some good, some not so good. And it's very hard for them to tell these stories, but at the end of the day, it's super important that they do tell the stories just to help prevent it from happening to anybody else. That's their ultimate goal, right? Like try to avoid complacency and always just keep in the back of the mind, like, hey, shit can go wrong real fast. Like it's just, can you handle that situation though? I mean, can you react fast enough? Do you know what to do when the boat's going down? That kind of stuff. And so we never try to scare people, but just remind them, like, when you're out in the water, you're by yourself. You can't just say, hey, ambulance, come pick me up. Like, yeah, you got the Coast Guard, but they might take them a while. So it's, I mean, do you ever get worried? Well, let me ask you this. What's one of the craziest experiences you've had so far that you've actually like, oh shit, that was scary?
I've been through a couple.
Especially in a kayak. Like I could see people waking the hell out of you or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes you just kind of have to deal with it. I crossed Lake Ontario in the canoe. So I crossed from the mainland of Canada, and it took 4 days, and I camped out on islands every single night. So my first crossing was to Main Duck, which was 19 miles offshore. And then my second crossing from there was 13 miles. And then I did another 18-mile crossing, and then the remainder to Oswego, New York, which was the first town and civilization I had entered since leaving the mainland of Canada.
Wow.
And so that crossing spanned over 4 days. And the first crossing, being 19 miles, it was dead calm the entire day. It took just about a little more than 5 hours to do that crossing. And that's because I pushed as hard as I possibly could. I'm in a canoe that weighs 350 pounds fully loaded, plus me, which is another 180. So, this is pushing 500 pounds mass object through the water as hard as you can for hours on end without stopping.
That's a lot of weight, yeah.
That is a lot of weight. But I was, 2-3 months into the trip at this point. Your body's getting there.
Yeah.
But I was about 14 miles into this crossing, and all of a sudden there's this breeze that skips across the water, and I see it, and I'm just like, my heart sinks. I'm like, a breeze isn't scary, but you know what a breeze can turn into.
Yeah.
And there wasn't supposed to be a breeze that day.
Yeah.
That's why it was really scary. And so this breeze eventually started kicking up, and the waves started just kind of getting a little bit bigger, and I'm kind of rolling up and down, and I'm like, okay. And I can see the island, for the first time in 4 hours. I can see Main Duck Island. I can see the trees off in the distance. I know where I'm going. I put my compass away. I see it. And all of a sudden the winds kick up to 10 miles an hour, which doesn't sound like much, but when you're in when you're in the middle of a Great Lake, and I'm so far east on this Great Lake, and this 10 mile per hour wind is coming from the west, I have about 300 miles of fetch that this wind is carrying these waves from. And before long, it was within 10 minutes, these waves were barreling up and down 3 to 4 feet high.
Damn.
And they're just kind of rolling like sandhills. They're not whitecapping.
And you're not in a kayak, you're in a canoe.
It's a both.
Like a hybrid, you said?
Yeah, it's a decked expedition canoe. It's entirely hollow. No kayak on the planet has that much volume.
Okay.
So I have the capacity to carry large bags. I have a large cockpit to fit large equipment in. So like I carry duffel bags and drums and stuff, and like 50-liter dry bags. You can't fit that stuff in a kayak. So
so you're just rolling. I'd be so scared of just that it would actually roll the whole kayak.
I started getting a little bit scared once when they hit about 4 feet. Jeez. And you can kind of see every now and then there'd be one that would break. So it was like right on the edge of where it was supposed to. Like they're rolling, but they're not quite there yet. Like it was probably, if it had been like maybe a knot or two higher in wind, it would have been really catastrophic for me. But I was 5 miles offshore, And I paddled about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half almost, in these huge swells that were coming up. And just as I was approaching the island, all of a sudden I see in the water next to me, there's a snake. And I'm like, oh my God. The snake's like 3 feet long. And it's a North American water snake. And I'm like, that's crazy. And I look to my right and there's another snake. And there's another one. And I'm like, what is happening here? I'm like, I'm still like 300-400 feet offshore. I'm like, why are all these snakes out here? And these waves are coming up and I'm rolling. But as you're getting closer to the shallows and, I'm on the north side of the island. So the island's like this, the wind's coming like this. And so as those waves are hitting those shallows, they're kind of diminishing in size. Yep. And I'm getting closer and closer, and I'm a few hundred feet offshore, and all of a sudden I see on this island there's just this white strip of sand, and it just looks so beautiful. Yeah. Because Canada doesn't have any sand. They're completely void of sand. Like there's very little places that have actual sand. And for the entire 2.5 months that I spent in Canada, there was no sand. I was sleeping on rocks. You couldn't pitch a tent down because you're on a rock. It sucked, but it was beautiful. I loved Canada for a lot of reasons. Yeah. But let me tell you, I really did miss the sand. So when I saw this island and I saw this white beach, I was just like, oh, thank you, God. And I'm paddling there. And after all these waves, I was terrified. As soon as I had gotten to the island and beached my canoe, I stepped out and I stepped on all of this algae. And I'm walking up because I'm barefoot in the canoe most of the time. So I walked up and I step on the beach and I go crunch, crunch, crunch. And I look down at my feet and I'm like, God damn it. And it's just millions of dead zebra mussel shells.
Oh, damn.
Not a speck of sand on this island. I fall on my knees and I'm like, no. And I look behind me and all of these huge waves that are out there start breaking into whitecaps. If I had gotten there 5 minutes later, I would have flipped that canoe. I guarantee it. And the whole lake was just full of whitecaps.
What time of the year was this?
This was September. This is early September.
Okay, so water's still kind of warm.
Oh yeah, you'd be fine. It's a long swim to shore.
Well, so you have a life jacket, but do you ever carry a survival suit just in case? I mean, this time of year, when you leave.
Yeah, I've worn a wetsuit before.
Okay, so you if it's cold enough, you have a wetsuit on. Mm-hmm. It's one of my biggest fears is a lot of people don't think about it, but you don't have much time when it's cold, or even if it's warm.
Yeah.
I mean, your body temperature can only adapt to even 80-degree water for so long.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just was curious if you had
I've worn one before.
Yeah.
It's
seems like you don't like to wear that though.
I don't. It's really hard to go pee.
Yeah.
Because there's no pee hole.
Yeah.
There's it's a tight suit, especially the onesies, unless it's just the panties. But I think that's what I need to get. I think I need to just get a lower one and then
there's a good company called Mustang Survival. And I'll reach out to them, and maybe I'll show them.
Do they have zippers on there?
They've got a lot of different like survival suits. A lot of them for commercial fisheries and any commercial boats that are out at shore a long time. The Coast Guard works with them. Check them out. I'll send you some information about them.
Another big downside to wearing that is that those were specifically made for certain things.
Yeah.
And those a lot of those wetsuits were made for diving and full immersion water sports, like jet skiing or waterboarding or something. And when you wear a wetsuit, when you're canoeing for 10 hours a day, let me tell you, that thing is the worst, stinkiest thing after 10 hours of canoeing. And you take that off and then have to put that on the next morning because you can't sleep in that. You can't.
I'm thinking there's the survival suits that I was wearing at the Coast Guard station. I'll send you this link. I mean, so the Coast Guard's got on board. If their boat goes down, whatever, they have to be able to put this survival suit on real quick. It'd honestly probably be too warm for you. But if you had it right now, you could probably be making way. I'll send it to you. It's pretty damn cool.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Sounds fun.
So another thing I was thinking, when you're doing these long expeditions, do you have a schedule? Do you have a travel time versus break time? All right, I'm going to try to knock out 10 to 12 hours today and get some rest, or do you just kind of go with the flow?
I would say a lot of the time I move when I need to move.
Yeah.
My mentality when traveling is if it can be endured, I endure it.
Yeah.
So this weather that gets this cold, I think the last day before I just actually decided to pull out and wait it out, I think it was 30 32 degrees. It was like 32 to 35.
I remember. Well, I think I called you or texted you that day. Yeah.
It was cold. And I paddled in that. I had thermals, I had wool mittens, I had 2 coats on and a dry suit top and a fur cap.
And it's still brutal.
And after that, I was just like, I don't want to do it. I do not want to paddle in low 20s next week.
Oh, you're smart though.
I felt it out. I felt what it would be like to be in similar conditions. It was high winds that day, so I had a lot of wind chill. It was like 32 degrees wind chill, which doesn't sound like much. You know, I've handled that before. I've been on tight canals with no wind in 35, and I've done that weeks on end. I can do it, but I knew that it would get a lot worse, and I decided not to do it.
Damp air sucks. Damp, cold air sucks. You know, like you go out to the mountains, it's totally different because you're up at elevation, it's dry. But that damp air that comes off, if you got a east wind here, like a northeast,
there's salt in the air. There's mist. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets in everything. It rots your zippers on your tent. Everything decays eventually on the Atlantic coast.
How was going through like New York area and all that, like the path to going through the city and everything?
It was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, New York was the biggest city that I'd ever passed through, and I went through the Kills.
Okay.
So I went through the actual port where all of the cargo ships go in to load up all their equipment. Well, they obviously have loading docks spread around, but like the main one, the Kills, that's where all the tugboats and everything, that's the industrial alley, you know, Cancer Alley or whatever you would call it.
Yeah, Cancer Alley.
Yeah. So I paddled through that. So that was a lot easier than I thought it would be. The hardest part was the ferry boats, because the ferry boats go like 20 to 40 knots.
They're flying.
Yeah. And I'm not sure where it ranks for like the most densely populated transportation
by water.
I think it's like 9th in the world or something, but don't quote me on that. I think I read that somewhere. But New York City has 38, if I can remember correctly, vessels that are moving, and I think they usually run about 70% of those at a time.
Yeah, it's insane.
Just all the time. So they have all of those terminals. Most of those terminals are right there on Manhattan, in between the east side and the west side.
All right, guys, this week's episode is brought to you by Turtlebox. Turtlebox is becoming the best waterproof and Bluetooth speaker in the industry. They are basically indestructible. You can throw them in the water. You can run them over with your car. I bring it everywhere. Besides just the boat, I have it on the beach. I have it working out at the house. They freaking crank. I'm telling you guys, the best speaker in the industry. So check them out. We were just up there this past summer. I did a podcast with a guy who was he was involved with the evacuation on 9/11, and it was the biggest evacuation by water in history. It actually overlapped Dunlap during the war, and then I talked to him about it, and he said it was just like, you know, it was commercial boats, recreational boats. Nobody thought about anything about it. They just knew that there was a mission they had to do and had to get everybody off that island. It's insane story.
I can't even imagine.
There's a good video on YouTube called Boat Lift. You need to listen and watch that one.
Okay.
Breaks everything down. And it's a story that a lot of people know about. Just everybody chipped in that day because everybody was stuck on the island. They closed everything down.
Yeah.
You know, it's nuts.
I got to see the new World Trade Center.
Oh, yeah. We did too. This is my first year I got to see that.
Yeah. So it was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. It's got like a more futuristic model or something like that. But yeah, I was standing there looking at that because you know that I was born in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born a month before that happened. Actually, I was born 3 weeks before that happened.
Wow.
So so I was just a fresh baby in the world. I still am a fresh baby in the world, but
I'm jealous.
But you know, at that time, going and visiting a place that happened in the same time period that I was born in, it just, you can feel the anguish still lurking in the air almost. There's a lot
eerie.
of places in the world that have that kind of just sediment just floating around.
Yeah, it was my first time I saw the memorial. I remember it was clear. I think I was only in first or second grade. And it's weird. I mean, I don't really remember much at that age, but I clearly remember that day, you know. I mean, picked this up from school, went home. I was like, what's going on? Just, you know, but then going to play video games or something. But you just remember that day like mom's flipping out. Like, what's going on? You know?
Yeah.
So
It was a really heavy part of history.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, I was just curious. I mean, you're that part of the country seems cool to me. Even north of there, like cutting through Maine and then and crossing the border there. Where did you cross the border from Canada to the States? I mean, where does it cross on the lakes?
Well, I was supposed to go to Kingston,
Okay.
but I didn't go to Kingston because I figured out that if I did this 19-mile crossing and jumped islands, I would save 10 miles,
Yeah. Okay.
which isn't much.
It is though.
But I did it anyway.
Yeah.
And it was fun. So I did that because of weather windows. I had a 4-day weather window in order to do those 4 consecutive crossings.
Mm-hmm.
And I took the risk and I did it. And that extra 10 miles would have set me back to where it would have taken me at least another 3 days to do that whole thing with those extra 10 miles. I wouldn't have had enough time.
Mm-hmm.
So I calculated my risks and I did it. But that's where I crossed. I crossed like 40 or something miles. It was like west of Kingston.
During these weather windows, or before the weather windows, where do you stay when weather's bad? Do you camp, or it seems like you've been communicating, meeting people?
I'll usually camp.
Yeah. Okay.
But more recently, I've received a lot of positive feedback through social media with people that I've been meeting online. So one of these people, Casey, who had been following my trip for about.
Shout out to Casey.
She
saved your ass here big time.
she saved my ass because that would have been really hard to sit a month in a tent. So so Casey had hosted me for this time during this cold front, and thanks to her, she has all of this amazing equipment because she's a seamstress herself. So she has this sewing machine and all of these boxes and assortments of needles and threads and everything. So the day that I took out, I figured this out, that she has all this equipment. So I got to work. And the first thing Casey and I collaborated on was we made this waistcoat together. And
that thing is sweet.
Yeah, look at this.
Yeah, let's see it. Dude. That's awesome, man.
I ordered some.
Do you make everything you're wearing? Did you sell and put together?
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. That's
everything except for the shoes.
You should start selling some of this on your website.
No.
Why not? No, not. I mean,
it'd take too long.
Yeah, but when you have time to kill, you can.
No.
People buy it.
No. It is. Believe me, it is not worth the time to make and sell. Like, there's no amount of money that could give me that time back. Yeah, I really enjoy doing it, and right now I just want to do it for myself. But after we made the waistcoat, because I still have to do the buttonholes and the buttons. But after we did the waistcoat together, she pulls out this like huge cowhide, and she's like, "This has been sitting in my closet for years, and 4 years." She says, "If you can make anything out of this, you can use any and all of it if you want." So I'm like, okay. So it took 3 days. But I remade my first tricorn, and this is what I just finished.
Dude. It turned out beautiful. And this is all from the cowhide?
Mm-hmm.
Well done, man.
Thank you.
And you can scale it, I guess, however you want. That's beautiful.
Yes, this is the...
Yeah.
And Casey also had some feathers. So my old one had a turkey feather and a parrot feather, which have their own stories. But Casey gave me a guinea feather, which is an African bird, and this is an ostrich feather. And I thought that those were really cool. And for the birth of the hat, it's just it was a great way to start.
So is this your outfit all the time, man?
Yeah, this is pretty much.
I love it.
It started as kind of just a joke.
Yeah, well, you were saying that earlier.
Yeah,
I need to introduce you to my buddy Pirate Rob.
Okay.
He's a character.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about him later.
All right, let's do it. I would love to. It sounds like a cool guy.
Yeah, okay, here's his crazy. I'll summarize it real quick. He took a center console from Sarasota all the way to Nicaragua. And they had there's a podcast I did with him. You can listen to it. Long story short, crazy story. Got down to Honduras, the whole story is insane, but Honduras is where shit hit the fan. And they got attacked by what they thought were pirates. I mean, they were getting shot at. They had all these panga boats coming at them. Come to find out later on that it was actually the Honduras Navy that hopped on board because they thought that they were smuggling drugs into the country, and that's just scratching the surface. The whole story is absolutely insane. Like, we had to cut some of it out. It was just off the wall.
You should have had him here today.
I should have. Pirate Rob. He's got a whole brand out of it. He's the man. He's a good friend of mine. I think he's down in Nicaragua right now. But that's a crazy trip though on a center console.
Yeah.
Not many people can really like to do it on a big boat.
How long did he spend on it?
Oh, man, I don't know. How long was that trip? I know. They had a lot of issues, man. They had like 2 motors break down the whole way. They had to stop, but where they were stopping, they really weren't supposed to be. So they had to get the hell out of there. It was insane. I think once you finish this Great Loop Challenge, and because I've read a lot of stories, this guy did it. He crossed the Atlantic on a stand-up paddleboard. But do you ever think about crossing the Atlantic?
He crossed the Atlantic on a stand-up paddleboard?
Yeah, dude, it was insane. He had a custom paddleboard built, not your normal paddleboard. He even had like a little cuddy cabin up on the front of the board where he can like tuck away and sleep. He had solar panels up there, and it was legit. I think he had a couple boats following him though too. Like, he wasn't by himself.
Wow.
I think. Don't hold me to that.
That's a wild journey.
Yeah.
He crossed in the North Atlantic, eh?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did it in the summer?
I'm assuming. I don't know. I didn't read the full article. I just remember skimming through it on social media and seeing it. I probably should read the whole article, but yeah, his board looked awesome. It was set up nice.
That sounds like a really wicked trip.
You should. You ever think about doing that? The whole time we're talking, I'm thinking, what's your next trip? Like, what do you have in mind?
The trips that I've done in the past and the trip that I'm doing now is they're all within my budget.
Yeah.
They're within my timeline, my budget, my skill level. They're within my understanding of the world and how everything is run. So I don't have a captain's license yet. I don't have a broad knowledge of what it's like outside the Intracoastal in the open ocean. In fact, I probably wouldn't last many days out there if you put me out in a sailboat.
You're smart. A lot of people would just say, screw it, I'll go.
I would like to figure it out. It's on the bucket list. Yep. I'm going to eventually. But at this point in my life, I haven't yet because of those reasons. I'm very young. I'm 23.
Dude, you're smart. You speak really well. I love hearing you say that because a lot of people that I know, and I see it all the time on the water, they just think, oh, this is easy. We're just going to go for it.
I may be a fool, but I'm not stupid.
No, you're not. Trust me, dude. You're doing it right. I'm loving this. I think it's badass. But I also admire, like I said, you're taking your time to educate yourself before you just send it and go.
We have to.
Yeah, you have to.
And I wasn't always that way. I used to just wing everything.
Same here.
Yeah, but through a lot of hardships and experiences, I found that a lot of those hardships are, number one, avoidable, and 2, easier to manage when you know what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
Everything is a game. Mm-hmm. Everything that you're experiencing is a game. The whole trip is a game.
Life's a game.
Life itself is a game.
Yeah.
It's some games are longer than others, but this to me is a game.
Yeah.
It's a big game of Monopoly. And as I'm making my plays and my choices on this game, I'm discovering and familiarizing myself about the rules of the game and what entails it. When you know what the game is about and you know what to expect, and you start being able to play your game really well because of your knowledge and understanding, because of the time you put into preparation, because of the tools you have at your disposal and the ability to use them, that game gets a lot easier and a lot less scary. And when I discovered that, I put a lot more time into researching, studying, and reading rather than foolishly gallivanting across the country.
Yeah.
I still foolishly gallivant across the country, but I do it in such a way that I'm...
And you probably learn something every day when you're on that kayak or canoe, whatever you want to call it.
I try to.
Yeah. What, so you're whatever that warms up, you're going to start heading southbound again.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to go back up the river.
Yeah. So this is the Great Loop.
This is the Great Loop.
So the Great Loop is 6,000 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so you technically not even a quarter of the way there.
I'm a third.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm about 418
That's true. I didn't
miles
think about
more
that.
than a quarter, but I'm technically a third. So because of this cold front, I decided to put the pin right here as to be phase 1. So right now, I look at this, pretty much 2,000 miles in, phase 1, 1/3 of the way through. Phase 2 begins when I start again after this cold front. And phase 2 is going to consist of the rest of the Intracoastal Waterway to Florida, the circumnavigation of Florida for the second time, the Intracoastal leading up to Mobile, and that basically the rest of the Intracoastal. So that's phase 2. That's about 1,500 miles. And so that whole section, pretty much that whole section, is routes that I've already done. It's going to be reintegrating with my 2023 routes.
Okay.
And that is going to be a lot easier than what I've already done, because most of the major bodies of water, the Great Lakes, Chesapeake Bay, Delaware River, New York City, all of the major difficult ports and hard spots were in phase 1. So I've done, and that's why it has taken me 186 days to get here.
And from here, in my opinion, I mean, because I've done it by boat, from here to like the Keys really isn't that bad. It's actually relatively easy if you're going to stick the waterway the whole way.
Yeah, I remember it quite fondly.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. I know a lot of people down that area.
Good. I was going to say, if you didn't know anybody, I could probably help you out too.
So I'm going to catch up on lost time through that.
Okay.
So like I said, I'm about 2.5 months behind schedule because of this weather on the Great Lakes. And like we faced 5 hurricanes this last year, 2024.
Brutal.
This was I think that they're saying that this is the worst hurricane season, the deadliest hurricane season in almost 2 decades.
I believe it.
And that's how old I am.
Yeah.
I'm 23. That's 2 decades.
Katrina was gnarly, but I mean, man, the mountains here off North Carolina got completely wiped out. We went up there.
Yeah.
We saw it. It was insane.
There was a lot of really crazy damages that happened. So that really set me back, because at least 2 of those hurricanes, I had to go through the blunt force of the backdrafts that had swept up. The first one, early August, swept right up the eastern coastline and went right through Canada. I was in Ontario, Canada, and I got hit by 45-mile-per-hour winds for 5 days.
Damn.
I ended up having to paddle 15 miles into an archipelago of islands to seek refuge on an abandoned island that I camped in my tent for 125 hours.
Wow.
To wait out these winds. I had no service. I had a Garmin GPS. I didn't even know that those were coming until 12 hours before they were there, because the Garmin doesn't show you past a certain period. So when I checked, it was like, oh my gosh, in 12 hours, there's going to be 45-mile-per-hour winds. Well, I know from experience that that's quite abnormal. I need somewhere to go.
Yeah.
So I paddled 15 miles into an archipelago, and there I sat for 5 days.
Damn, man.
And I didn't know it was going to be 5 days. I only had 24 hours of weather data. So just waited it out.
Do you log all this on like a logbook?
Mm-hmm.
You do, like every day?
Like physically or digitally?
Yeah, physically, or like I mean, for example, for my boat, every time I take a fishing trip, whatever it is, I log it. We just started making logbooks.
Oh,
I think it's super important, because I mean, it's not even just for log's sake of the hours on your motor, but shows what the weather was that day, what the tide was doing, blah blah blah. So if you look back and then you have a little summary of your day, and then a year later you go and fish in that same exact day around that time of year, you can look at it and be like, oh, okay, the moon was doing this, the weather was this, and
no, I don't have a logbook.
You should keep one.
I have a document of the hours that I spent canoeing that day, but I don't have anything past that.
I'll give you one. We just made some.
I'll start logging.
Yeah, I think it's cool, man. Because then one day you can hand it down to, if you ever have kids or your grandkids, and they can read it. I don't know. I think some guy commented on one of our things, and he's like, "There's so many apps for this these days." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm old school. I don't know. I like just writing on a thing."
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll pull it out.
All right, I'll give you one before you leave.
I would love that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's cool. I kept one. I just bought a new boat last year, and I was able to look back this year on our trips, and I was like, okay, we didn't do so good that day. Maybe wonder why. The moon was doing this, and then look at it like, oh, we did good this day. Go back the same day a year later, and you crush it. I do a lot of spearfishing, and had a great day spearfishing. That same exact time of year, and there's a reason why.
Like clockwork.
Yeah, exactly. But so man, yeah, you're almost there. I don't know, man. My buddy reached out to me and said that you were stopping by here, and I was like, this is perfect timing. I really wanted to link up with you real quick.
Well, you have the when and the where.
Yeah.
Let me tell you why.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so I got run over by the car.
Yeah,
I'm essentially doing this out of gratitude for life. I really do. I love it out here. I love nature.
I love hearing that. You're not, but, you know, people I've talked to that said that same exact thing that you said. That that have been through traumatic incidents.
Yeah.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but
It's the reason. It's a big reason for a lot of people.
Yep.
And I really love to see that. I think when people finally connect with that in life, they really start to make wiser choices on why they do things. People take more risks. Ironically, having almost faced death, it's like, well, I have this second chance at life. I might as well spend it the best way that I can. If life is a game, then I want to play it absolutely to the best way that I can. I'm going to win.
Yep.
And winning isn't, making the most money or being a billionaire. It's not going out and having everybody know about you. Winning is self-fulfillment. It's happiness in your own heart. It's doing something that not only provides value to yourself, but provides value to others.
Damn right.
And if you want to provide value to others, you have to provide value to yourself first. You have to love yourself to love others. You have to provide value to the world by providing value to yourself. There's an old Japanese concept. It's called ikigai. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Ikigai is 4 main pillars, and it's what you love to do, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And so when those 4 pillars come together, they form ikigai. So
that's really cool.
So what I do is I try and orient my life and what I do by these 4 main pillars to form that, because it's a good concept. I don't follow it religiously, but if I align, my choices and think about that in the back of my head,
it's also realistic.
I got a good path.
It makes total sense.
So I love canoeing. I love nature. I love being out here. I love the whole thing. I love the challenges. I'm good at it. I do this pretty well, I think. I can manage a lot of the stress, a lot of the hardship. I meet a lot of really great people through it. Well, what does the world need? Well, I guess, the world needs some positive input. They need to see that the world isn't all black and white, and it's not all, demonic and Satan all the time, that everything is portrayed on the news. You turn on your television and everything is negativity, because negativity sells. Practically, the news industry is an entertainment industry. So when you see that and you're feeding your mind with all this negativity all the time, that's all you're going to think the world is, because that's all you're feeding it. So you don't want to feed into that negativity. So if I can provide some value through my writing towards the world and say, hey, there's actually thousands, if not millions of people out in the world that not only love what I do, but would love to be part of that, that I can meet and show that, like, hey, like, the world is actually a really great place. Look at this person doing this. Look at that person doing that. I write a lot about human interest stories of people that I meet, particularly veterans too, because veterans have really in-depth and interesting personal experiences.
They're amazing, man. Not to change this topic, it relates. We just got back on Monday. We went, there's a guy, his name's Johnny Savage. He wrote a really good book. It's called Lost in the Stream. I'll give you a copy. His boat capsized out in the Gulf. Long story short, it almost went down, or the boat did go down. He was in the water. He basically was about to give up. He's just like, we're going to die out here. And, he got to the point where he's like, I'm not going to just, he thought, I'm going to get eaten by sharks or I'm going to drown. I don't want to be I'm giving up. As he was about to give up and just go down and just dive as deep as he can and basically just go, he got just a second wind from God, he says, and just totally just changed his mentality and said, all right, I'm not going to do this. Like, we're never going to give up. And everything after that just started falling together. Like, they found some flares. They found some other, like a backpack full of supplies. The next thing you know, a cruise ship came by and another boat. Flares ended up seeing them anyways. They were rescued. And ever since then, he's been working with a lot of veterans and people with PTSD to explain he tells the story and is just like, hey, listen, guys, like, don't ever give up. I mean, with as much as the hardships come and go, just keep going, man, because like life is good and God is there looking at you. And the whole story is incredible. And so anyways, we went up to one of the places there and got to meet all those guys, and it was really cool. So
it's amazing.
Yeah. It was something that I've never experienced.
What's the name of
it's Valhalla Mission Force. Valhalla, right? Valhalla Mission Force. It's they're all, man, I mean, badass Navy SEALs that have been some of the guys are in SEAL Team 6, and he partakes in that, and they're all up there building custom knives for people, and it's just really cool, man. We filmed the whole thing. I did a podcast up there. You'll see it. And I'll send you some more information about it. But it's one of those things that wasn't shared too much to the public about, and these are such amazing people, and they've been through hell and back, but the positivity, the vibes I felt in there, like we were all cried at some of the stories, but we laughed a lot. It was epic, man. Yeah. I loved it. I was like, there's something I've never experienced before. And so to be a part of that, I got home and I started doing some research about who we were with and all this. It's like, holy shit, that was awesome. So we're going to try to do more with them. I want to take them out. There's an old Coast Guard tower off our coast here. It's called Frying Pan Tower. A guy bought an old government-owned light station that was at auction. Anyways, he now owns it. It's really sweet up there. It's like he cleaned it up real nice. And I want to take those guys out there and to experience something cool, do some, fishing, diving, all that.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. I know that they would love that.
Oh, yeah.
And you probably get a lot of stories out of it, too. You should have all those guys at this table sharing experiences.
Well, I didn't really know what to expect when I got up there. Now that I got a better idea, it's just like, man, I told them, I said, the doors are open. You guys ever want to come down here? I'll take you out there. When he turns the lights off out there, there's no light pollution. The Milky Way is just completely lit up. Shooting stars everywhere. You should take your kayak out there.
Yeah. It'd be a run, but
just make sure there's a good weather window. Actually, he did he parasailed there. What, right? Or he tried to? Yeah. That's crazy, right?
That's pretty crazy. I don't know if I would take my canoe there, but
it's yeah. It's a little. If there's a good weather window, you can probably make it out there. It's about 37 miles, I think, 38 miles. You could do it.
My longest day in that canoe is 53 miles, and it took 16 and a half hours.
If you went out of the river, it'd be closer. It'd be 18 miles, I believe, and you'd be going down current. So,
okay,
yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll follow that up in the future.
Maybe I might need a support boat for that. That's offshore.
I'll follow you.
Right? Yeah.
It'd be fun, man.
Okay,
but
so let me tell you.
Yeah. Kill
This canoe, I acquired it because of the guy who made it.
Yeah.
The guy who made it was Verlen Kruger. And he went on this huge expedition. He wasn't a veteran, but he was a plumber. And his son, Steve Landick, was 29 at the time. I think Verlen was brushing 50, 51. And him and his son planned for 5 years. They built this canoe. They called it the Loon. They said, it's neither a kayak or a canoe. It's neither a duck nor a goose. We call it the Loon. So that's what it was. So the Loon was born. It was the prototype that they wanted to make a canoe with enough hydrodynamics so that it could be paddled upriver, but also be able to face harsh weather. In order to make a canoe that slim, nimble, but also had enough storage capacity to be a long distance expedition canoe, it had to be like perfect. So that's why it has a decking, but it can fit everything you ever need to like last for months on end. In my canoe, I carry about 4 months of food. So the only thing I really need to restock for regularly is water, unless I'm in fresh water, in which case I would just have a water filter. So they took this canoe in 1980 in the high in the Rocky Mountains. It was Three Forks, Montana.
Okay.
And they paddled it from Three Forks, Montana, almost 3,000 miles to St. Louis, and they did it in 37 days. And then have you ever heard of the MR340?
No.
The MR340 is the longest nonstop canoe race or paddling race in the world. It's called the MR340 because it's the Missouri River last 340 miles of the Missouri River.
Okay.
And so when they got to Kansas City, they did the MR340, 340 miles in 3 days.
Wow.
And they did it faster than most people had ever done the MR340, and they did it 20 years before the MR340 even existed.
Wow.
And then when they got to St. Louis, they paddled north up the Illinois River 300 miles, paddled through the Great Lakes, went through Montreal and around Maine, and then came all the way back down and circumnavigated Florida, and then made it to New Orleans by February. And in February, middle of winter, they were the first and only people in history to paddle the full 2,400 miles of the Mississippi River backwards against the current.
What? Why have I never heard of this?
And they did it faster than most people paddled down the river. They did it in like 80-something days, 83 days or something. So a little bit more than 2.5 months. And when they made it to the headwaters of the Mississippi, there was still ice on the water.
Is there any like books or articles about that? I'm sure there is.
So that was the first portion of what is now known as the Ultimate Canoe Challenge, the longest expedition ever taken. So I recently wrote an article for Michigan Enjoyer, if anybody's more interested in details about that exact trip. So so they took these canoes from the headwaters and they portaged to the boundary waters and Canadian waters and paddled over 4,000 miles to the Arctic Ocean in these canoes before the next winter. So they were, mid-April, they started this and they made it there by, I think it was September. And so they made it to the Arctic Ocean, turned around and paddled almost 2,000 miles back to the Pacific Ocean. And then we're, I think, the first people in canoes to have ever paddled the entire Pacific coastline down to the Gulf of California. And when they paddled down to the Gulf of California on the Pacific Ocean, open waters,
That's nuts.
in canoes, they paddled up the Gulf of California and did a series of portages that spanned hundreds of miles where they carried their canoes and luggage over their backs to the mouth of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. We're the first and only people recorded in history to have ever paddled the full length of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon against the current.
That's insane. Who are these guys?
Verlen Kruger and Steve Landick.
And I want to read more about this. There's
a lot to it.
I bet there is.
They've done a lot in their lives. So after the Grand Canyon, they portaged, made it back to the Missouri River, but continued up through the rivers, went back up through Canada, came through, I believe, the Lake Superior, and then finished finally in Lansing, Michigan after 3 years in the canoes. And so they did the longest canoe expedition ever taken in human history. They did it in the same exact model that I'm doing this in. And the reason why I'm doing this is because on that trip, they were also the first and only people documented in history to have ever done the Great Loop clockwise in canoes. Most everybody, including people in powerboats and motor vessels, have always, most of the time, done it counterclockwise because of the directions of the rivers.
Yeah.
When you do the Great Loop backwards, which nobody wants to do because you have to spend more for gas or it's a lot significantly harder, people don't reverse loop because of the directions of the rivers, and it doesn't make it any easier in any way. It's everything is out of season, and you have to do everything. It's significantly harder. The reason why it's harder is because when you get to the inland rivers on the Gulf of Mexico, you have to paddle 1,300 miles against the current back to Lake Michigan. So that's phase 3. I just completed phase 1, which was 2,000 miles in 186 days. And I faced a lot of weather and it had set me back quite a bit, but I'm still technically on schedule and I can still make it work. Phase 2 is going to be the easiest. I circumnavigate Florida.
And you've already done it.
And I've already done it. That'll be the easiest. Phase 3 is the hardest. I saved the hardest for last because I wanted there to be a big finale. I also want to know if it's still possible. I don't know if it's possible.
It's January now.
Mm-hmm.
Middle January. When do you expect to be in phase 3? What time of the year?
3 months from now.
Okay.
I'm gonna be there before the spring runoff.
I'll see where we're at. It'd be cool to meet you somewhere.
I'm gonna be paddling upriver for phase 3.
Okay.
So the majority phase 3 is only 1,600 miles because
phase 3 is gonna be tough.
Yeah, it's gonna be difficult. So I'm really interested. Can I paddle 1,300 miles upriver consecutively day after day until it's over?
I think
how long is that going to take? What is my average day going to be like? I've had days where I've had all the tides against me, and the tides are ripping 4 knots, and I've succeeded days 18, 20, 22 miles against the current. It's taken 10, 12 hours sometimes, but I've done it.
Do you ever lock up and just like, damn man, I'm gonna stop for a second or something? I mean, I don't know. I just going up current sucks.
You just got to keep pushing it out.
Pushing.
Yeah, and I do this with a back surgery. I'm not any victim, and I don't hold it against myself. No, I never let it draw me back, but just to be aware
that anybody can do it. Right?
That anybody can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we really draw ourselves back and we really set ourselves. I think we cheat ourselves out of potential when we say we can't do things.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, there are a lot of things that are technically impossible that I couldn't do. Like I've accepted the fact that I'll probably never go to space. I've accepted the fact that I'm probably never going to do a lot of things. I'm probably never going to have billions of dollars. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but there are a lot of things that are far beyond my reach, or things that I simply don't want or don't want to do. But the things that I can do that are reachable, that are my dreams that I want to do,
You're going to go for it.
I think I cheat myself out by saying, oh, that's too hard.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to do this. Not for the reason that I want to be the best or the first. It's already been done before. It's already been proven it can be done before. I'm doing it in the same boat it was done in the first time. But I want to do it for the pure historical significance of the fact that it has never been done in 44 years.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I think it's really interesting why no one has ever reverse looped in a canoe in 44 years. Nobody has had the tenacity. Nobody has thought that, like, I want to do that. There's been about a dozen or so people that have kayaked or canoed the Great Loop, and they've all done it counterclockwise since then.
But nobody else has tried to go the opposite.
Why would they? It's harder. And
yeah, I know, but you're right. Yeah, I love it, dude. Has anybody ever tried or not even tried?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No documented anything of anyone ever trying.
That's awesome.
Verlen Kruger and Steve Landick were the only people. I've been searching for years to see if anybody else has done it, any word of it, but I've never seen it. So I really,
I'm stoked for you.
I want to see if it's possible. Okay, so there's a couple of things that could potentially stop this, like for good. One, if a boat hit me and just
injury,
if I broke an arm or a leg, that would be immediate stop. If I was attacked or maimed by an animal, that's a big one. A bear or an alligator. Another big one is while I'm paddling upriver, completely dependent on nature, and I'm not there in time, and I end up going up the 250-mile segment of the Mississippi from the Ohio, there's a segment there that's going to be the fastest current that I'm going to experience. And if I'm not there before the spring runoff, that there's a chance that water current may be just too possible to physically paddle against.
Damn.
And that is my only path through that segment. And if I'm not there at a specific time of year, then I will have to wait for an entire year to be able to attempt it again.
So you are on a tight schedule in a way.
Yeah.
So
there's very few things that would stop the trip, but those are a couple of them. But other than that, I've pushed through a lot of very difficult hardship. Going through the Outer Banks, I had 3 complete fogged out days where I had zero visibility.
I remember that, yeah.
I crossed the Albemarle Sound, 12 and a half miles of open water in one of those fog days.
Beautiful there, though. Well, can't see anything in the fog, but it's really nice.
It was the dead of fog. I had no navigation. If you look on my live tracker on my website, then there's a
live tracker. I'll have to follow that.
I do.
Yeah.
And that live tracker was one of my sponsors. That was 060 Maps.
Okay.
And they reached out to me and they donated their resources for this digital pirate treasure map online so that people can follow my trip and where I am, which I thought was really cool. And so they make these expedition maps for explorers to do. They do everything from Antarctica expeditions to Atlantic and Pacific crossings, anything from large tall ships to rowboats to canoeing, hiking.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really cool to have their support behind me. But because of that, I was able to see my exact tracked route across that crossing, and you could see where I get turned around because I got hit with a 10-mile-per-hour southeastern wind in the middle of that crossing. I was 5 miles from shore there too. And I got hit with this wind that wasn't supposed to be southeastern. It was supposed to be southwestern, but it changed for whatever reason, and it started kicking up. And I was battling 1.5 to 2 foot swells that were whitecapping
in the fog. That sucks.
No visibility with a compass that's going like this.
Captain's like 2 biggest fears on the water is one's a fire, and number 2 is usually fog.
Yeah,
it's like the 2 scariest things that can happen on the water.
Yeah.
But I remember that. I remember being here at one house. I was like, damn, it is foggy.
Yeah. You just pull a compass out and keep moving.
Yep.
Because if you wait there for that day, the next day it's windy.
Yeah.
Can't go anywhere. Then you have to wait another day.
Especially if you can see the future weather, you got to get there.
So that's why the principle is if it's endurable, I endure it.
Absolutely.
If I have the skills, I'll do it. So I try to.
Well, when do you think you're gonna head southbound again? After this, I mean, we got a whole other week of cold weather coming. I mean, at what point are you gonna be like, I'm just gonna have to bear through this?
Um, my aim, I think, is probably about a week and a half to 2 weeks.
Okay, so
I'll get bundled up.
I'll
go
got
out.
some time then.
Yeah, I'll go out when it starts brushing close to like 45 every day or a little bit warmer. I'll bundle up and I'll suffer through it. It's mostly the nights because I'm going to have to camp in those nights. And although it's getting up kind of closer to the 50s in between these two Arctic blasts, the nights are still horrific. I mean, they're still 20s
If you don't have a place to stay, that sucks.
And I've camped in 29, I think was my coldest that I've camped in, and it's very difficult to camp in 29 degrees. My bag is rated at 15, but that's the lowest you can tolerate. That's survival.
Borderline survival.
Like comfort wise, or like recommended wise, you should camp in like 15 degrees higher than what your sleeping bag is rated at. So my sleeping bag being 15, I find that anything below 30 is not tolerable. I don't get enough sleep to be able to perform the next day. And I'm burning, something you might find really interesting is I'm burning probably about 8,000 calories a day. And over the last 6 months of canoeing here from Michigan, I've lost over 30 pounds.
30 pounds?
30 pounds.
Holy shit.
I was skinny when I started. I don't know where it's coming from.
Damn, man. What do you, so you got to eat, like you said, beans, rice. What else? I mean, I would want to load up on, carbs.
Yeah, I don't know where the weight's coming from. I mean, my balls are certainly not getting any smaller.
You're just freaking nuts, bro. You need to make sure when you start heading south, you're in Sneads Ferry or Topsail right now?
Sneads Ferry.
Sneads Ferry. Okay.
But I leave from Surf City.
Oh, Surf City. Okay. I'm just trying to think. Would you stop here at Wrightsville or Wilmington for the night?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Give me a shout.
I think so. I mean, how far up the Intracoastal is Surf City from here?
About a 45-minute drive in a car. Yeah, it's 30 miles. 30 miles. Yeah, what do you think? Would you keep going?
I could stop in.
Okay, you should. Especially if it's cold, give me a shout, man. I can hook you up with a place.
Yeah. We'll come by. Maybe we'll get some pictures or videos.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely, man. And if it is nice, I will recommend. There's like Masonboro right out here. There's a couple of really cool islands to camp at, like really pretty, where you can tell like they've dug out these little sections where you can camp and stay warm. Like really, really nice. Like worth camping and getting the sunrise shot in the morning.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and I'll drop pins. I can show you exactly where they are.
Okay.
So
sweet.
Dude, yeah, man, this has been great. I'm so stoked that you're able to stop by and do this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. I want to stay in touch and I'll, take care of you. There's a couple things I want to show you. And man, I want everybody listening to follow your journey. So I'm gonna put their your website on our link and so people can see it.
Yeah. And also shout out to Verlen Kruger. He died in 2002 and 2004. I think he died in 2004. So he without him and his efforts and his expeditions, of course, there would be nothing to inspire us. So I think that should be recognized. And of course, the long continuum of people before him that had not only inspired him, but inspired the people before him. And I think it's important for not only me, but everyone to recognize that we are all part of this continuum and that the object should not be out of ego to be the best of anything, but rather to continue this long timeline of inspiration and creation.
Amen to that, dude. You just
important.
nailed it.
It's very important.
Yeah. 100%.
And also shout out to your podcast. This is really fun.
Dude, I'm just doing this for fun. Like I said earlier.
I love it. I love it. With two guys doing things for fun.
Yeah.
I love it.
Dude, thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, man.